What if 2025 could be the year you finally take back control and cut down drinking or even stop completely? By the end of this video, you'll have 5 powerful steps you must follow if you finally want to change your relationship to alcohol 2025. I know this journey because I walked in myself and have now been sober for over 7 years. The steps I'm going to share with you today are the same ones that not only changed my life, but they've worked for hundreds of clients as well. Hi, I'm Luke Worsfold, the lead counsellor here at Lisa Inside Addiction. We specialise in helping functioning professionals get their drink or drug use under control for our 8-week addiction counselling programme. Now, let's dive into the 5 steps. Step 1. Awareness. Understanding your drinking cycle. The first step to quitting drinking is bringing your automatic pattern of behaviour from your subconscious to your conscious mind. We can do this by becoming aware of the short-term addiction cycle. So let's take a deeper look at what goes through our minds when we drink. Our thought process goes something like this. First, we have the trigger that comes into our conscious mind. This then causes us to be bombarded with craving thoughts. Our logical mind then starts colluding with the cravings and stacks justifications until we press the screw it and drink button. Then, after the carnage, the consequences show up and we start to feel the guilt and shame. This guilt and shame then becomes a trigger in themselves because they start another round of justifications as a reason to drink, keeping the loop on repeat. Let's break it down a bit further. What do I actually mean by a trigger? The fear of missing out on a friend's birthday drinks, the overwhelm and stress of a hard week at work, the hurt and anger after an argument with your partner, a memory of how you spoiled your daughter's last birthday because you drank too much. These triggers aren't something we capture or even aware of sometimes. They happen deep in our subconscious, deep in the back of our minds. They just flash by in that moment. But after the triggers, next comes the cravings. Our mind shouting through a megaphone, saying, act now. Go to his birthday and have a drink. Go to the pub on the way back from work. Go and show her and have a pint. Go drink to numb this pain. These thoughts are so loud they start to drown out our reasonable thinking. But if that wasn't enough, then come the reinforcements, the big guns, the justifications. They come in as backup to obliterate any last remains of our logical mind. These thoughts sound like, I don't want to miss out, everyone else is having fun. I can have a sneaky one, no one will catch me. I need to get out of the house anyway and clear my head and just forget about it. She's had loads of birthdays ahead of her. I've heard them all and thought most of them myself as well. You can't kid a kidder. The point is, eventually we give in. All that logic is gone and we act out and drink. Then walks in the consequences. In the back of our mind, we're aware of the payment we just put on our emotional credit card. And that bill is about to come due. The pit and the pain and the pit in the stomach as we walk through the door at 3 a.m. when we said we just had one and be home by 10. Or the tone of our boss's or client's voice when we call in sick and let them down again. Or the look in our partner's eyes, another lie rolls off the tongue and a little bit more trust erodes. This is a cycle we've been living for years. Becoming aware of this cycle, and by becoming aware of it, we can be more empowered to change it. So it's important to write down and journal out our own triggers, cravings and justifications, see them on paper and start to recognise them. Then we can start to get out of this automatic mindless pattern of impulsively drinking every trigger and become more mindful, ultimately starting to change our behaviour and rewire our neural pathways in our brain. Step 2. Identifying root causes. Why do you drink? Most people think the key to overcoming addiction is to stop the behaviour itself, but the truth is, stopping the behaviour is just the surface. The real breakthrough happens when you dig deeper to uncover why you drink. Addiction is rarely about the substance, it's rooted in emotional, social, habitual or environmental triggers. In my experience, for example, the stress of running my business and the unresolved trauma of losing my mum when I was just 10 years old led me down the same path. I drank and used drugs to numb the pain and escape the emotions I just didn't know how to handle. Many of the clients I've worked with in the past have had similar challenges. Here's some examples from the research. 22% have lost someone close to them in the past. 16% one or both their parents drank or used drugs heavily or daily. 12% were cheated on in the past. 11% their parents divorced when they were young. 10% grew up in environments with domestic or emotional abuse. 8% experienced sexual assault or abuse in the past. 8% moved frequently as a child. 5% had been in a relationship with a heavy drinker or drug user. Now, although it's important to mention 8% of clients who were surveyed said none of the above, so their addiction is likely more habitual. In addiction counselling, we go beyond treating the symptoms like cravings or habits. Instead, we focus on addressing the causes of clients' addiction. This means using powerful psychological tools like cognitive behavioural therapy and trauma-informed person-centred therapy to help clients uncover and understand their emotional triggers. So I want you to stop and have a think right now. What are the moments that make you reach for a drink? Maybe it's the stress of a hard day at work, or the loneliness of an empty house, or guilt and shame from past mistakes. Once you pinpoint these triggers, you can stop the automatic cycle of drinking to numb the discomfort by learning healthy coping mechanisms to soothe your emotions rather than numbing with drink. For example, one of my clients realised that drinking wasn't about social pressure, it was about avoiding memories of a painful breakup. Together we worked to process those emotions and build healthier coping mechanisms so they didn't need alcohol as a crutch. This step in identifying the root causes takes courage. It means looking at parts of yourself you might have buried for years, but when you face those root causes, everything changes. So if you need any extra support in going deeper into that, I recommend doing it with a trained professional like a counsellor, or specifically an addiction counsellor. So if you need any extra help, me or one of my team can help you through that journey. Just reach out to us anytime. Step 3. Building emotional resilience and mastering triggers without drinking by developing healthy coping mechanisms. Once we have identified our cycle of addiction and triggers and what's underlying it, we need to take things a step further by learning new healthy coping mechanisms to turn to when we're triggered, rather than just going back to drink or drugs to numb their emotions. We need to develop these healthy coping mechanisms as habits in our brain so that they become the new norm. And we go over 11 tools in our flagship program, Addiction Control, but I have time to go through them all now, so I want to share the most 4 important ones. First is mindfulness. This is about becoming aware of automatic behaviour patterns and consciously choosing to change them, and subsequently going from mindless drinking to mindfully avoiding acting on your triggers. Next is consequences. That's about acknowledging the impact of one's actions on oneself and others, progressing from denial to taking responsibility. Your script. That's about recognising and understanding your subconscious patterns of behaviour, transitioning to conscious awareness and intentional decision making. Lastly, we have therapy. That's about processing the value of professional help and recognising the value and processing your emotions' underlying issues. Sometimes it can be hard to make these changes and to get them to stick. We could try them for a while, but the triggers get too intense and we resort back to drinking. So it's important that when you are in the early stages of your cycle of addiction, for example, your partner's just given you an ultimatum and you're determined to change, it's important to use all that motivation to stop drinking, then in a gap before the motivation fades, to really embed these changes and these healthy coping mechanisms in your mind, and that's how you break through and create lasting change. Step 4. Rebuilding relationships and trust. 70% of my clients are in intimate relationships, but if you're in the 30% that isn't, then think about this as rebuilding trust with your parents or siblings or the people closest to you. As Sam Harris noted in his book called Lying, lying is almost by definition a refusal to cooperate with others, condenses the lack of trust and trustworthiness into a single act. It's both a failure to understand and an unwillingness to be understood. To lie is to recoil from the relationship. Lying about where you are or how many drinks you're going to have or that you're going to not drink at all is a problem, and over time these lies erode the trust of the people around you, and the closest relationship that gets affected are our intimate ones. So how can you rebuild trust? Simply put, communicate and be honest. But practically speaking, the best way to start with is micro commitments. A micro commitment is a low stakes agreement between you and another person. For example, your partner asks you if you can do the dishes before bed. You might be quick to say, yeah, of course, I will, why not? But then things happen and you long it off. That was a lie and you're not sticking to your word, and every time you don't keep your word, you're digging a deeper grave. Now, you may think, Luke, who cares about the dishes after a long day at work? Well, your partner does, and so should you. Because how you do anything is how you do everything. Let me repeat that to you. How you do anything is how you do everything. And rebuilding trust with people you have hurt and betrayed over and over again might be one of the most important things you ever do in your life. So by starting with low stakes training ground, or with the low stakes training ground of micro commitments, you'll give yourself a better chance to rebuild the trust again. So over the next few weeks, I want you to commit to doing things you say you're going to do. Make sure they're realistic and achievable. Don't agree to things you can't do, as it will just compound the problem. But if you're in a situation you cannot commit to and say that arises, just say, I'm sorry, I can't commit to that yet. Then, as time goes on and you start to trust yourself more and more, you can work your way up to bigger commitments with the people around you. But this leads me on to my next point. There's one more critical person you should rebuild trust with, and that person is you. Rebuilding trust with yourself is a very underrated part of the whole process because we assume trust only exists between two people. But I cannot stress enough how critical and fundamental it is to rebuild your word with yourself. To be able to look yourself in the mirror and say, proud of myself, I didn't drink today. I didn't lie to anyone, didn't give in to my usual justifications, I persevered, I know I can do even better tomorrow. Gaining that inner confidence by sticking to your word will make you unshakable. Step 5. Socialising and your peer group. One of the biggest challenges in recovery is navigating social situations without feeling out of place or tempted to drink. Socialising often goes hand in hand with alcohol, but the good news is you can maintain an active social life while staying in control. First, by assessing your peer group. The first step is evaluating the people you spend time with. Ask yourself, are these relationships built on shared interests or just shared drinking? You might discover that some friends are just drinking buddies without deeper connections, while others have shared values that go beyond alcohol. By identifying who supports your recovery, you can focus on nurturing those meaningful relationships. Next, setting boundaries. Boundaries are essential in recovery. Before a social event, decide your limits. Whether it's leaving early, bringing non-alcoholic drinks, or letting friends know you're not drinking, communicating these boundaries in advance can reduce pressure, create a supportive environment. Finding common ground. One important aspect is about uncovering what you have in common with your friends outside of drinking. Maybe that's shared interest of sports or hobbies or meaningful conversation. By leaning into these shared commonalities, you can strengthen the relationship and create a social life that doesn't just revolve around alcohol. Handling questions and peer pressure. Inevitably, someone might ask, why aren't you drinking? In these moments, having a simple response like, I'm taking a break or I'm focusing on my health can shift the conversation. And most people respect honesty and will move on quickly when you set the tone with confidence. Building new connections. If your current social circle feels like a barrier to recovery, it might be time to expand your network. Joining interest-based groups or volunteering or even connecting with others in recovery can introduce you to people who are aligned with your new goals and values. Enjoying a social event without feeling left out. By putting all of these into place, it will help you enjoy social events without feeling left out. You can use some additional tools like having non-alcoholic drinks and that kind of stuff. But remember, recovery doesn't just mean giving up your social life, but creating one that supports you and supports your growth, but that just doesn't revolve around alcohol. If you've made it this far, you now have a clear roadmap to take control of your drinking in 2025. Whether it's understanding your drinking cycle, identifying your triggers, or learning to rebuild trust in your relationship, these 5 steps are designed to give you the clarity and tools you need to succeed. And remember, change doesn't happen overnight, it happens one decision at a time. The journey may feel overwhelming at times, but know this. Every step you take brings you closer to the life you want, a life where you're proud of yourself, connected to your loved ones, and free from the hold alcohol had on you. You can do this, and you don't have to do it alone. If you want to learn about our step-by-step roadmap to get your drinking under control and stop drinking completely, click the link below to watch the video and book your